John Lynch's pre-draft press conference is over. Brock Purdy and Fred Warner also spoke here at the 49ers facility. And I have to say that the Brandon Aiyuk situation does seem to be intensifying, as you would expect, because the major inflection point of the NFL draft is coming up on Thursday. Today, John Lynch said that he really wants Brandon Aiyuk to be with the 49ers for the rest of his career. So Lynch is echoing the thoughts that we've heard from that side throughout this entire process. He was asked a little bit later if there's a chance that Brandon Aiyuk won't be on the 49ers roster come Friday, and Lynch's quote was, "I wouldn't anticipate that," but he didn't go into any more detail. He preferred to talk about the 49ers prospect draft plans. He preferred to talk about the philosophy behind the draft because he wants to keep the whole negotiations between the 49ers camp and the Brandon Aiyuk camp. But reading in between the lines, especially if we look at previous 49ers contractual situations, there right now isn't the level of commonality that the 49ers would need with Brandon Aiyuk's camp to finalize a deal. Deadline pressure typically gets these things done. It has gotten them done in every other instance with this 49ers regime. You go back to George Kittle in 2020, Fred Warner in 21, Deebo Samuel in 22, Nick Bosa last season. But one interesting thing that John Lynch did add today is that he wants this Brandon Aiyuk deal to be wrapped up, to be finished earlier than the Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa contracts. Those obviously bled into training camp, or in Bosa's case, even further over the past two seasons. The 49ers, they want to learn from that. They want this to be wrapped up much sooner, just because you don't want it hanging over your head later. You want Aiyuk training with the team. Now, Aiyuk has been in the team facility at points during this offseason, which we've talked about. Brock Purdy spoke today, and he said that he's been texting a little bit with Brandon Aiyuk, and that he actually ran into him a couple times in the team facility earlier. It sounds like for rehab treatment purposes. But Aiyuk is not present for the current 49ers offseason program. And then we go back to the fact that, you know, if obviously there are teams interested in having Brandon Aiyuk. He's one of the best receivers in football. We go back to just logic in this situation. The 49ers are trying to make sure that they're better next year. They're at the very least, trying to make sure they're not worse. That's why I always go back to the King's ransom theory. That was the theory, and I think it might have even been a stated thing from the 49ers 2 years ago with Deebo Samuel. We're not moving this guy unless we get a King's ransom in return, because that's the only way that we could possibly get better, or at least avoid getting worse in what's a win-now season. The draft is the inflection point, because if you do get a King's ransom in return, or at least the chances of getting one in return, they would have to happen, you know, the haul would have to come before the draft, because you'd have to be able to turn around with your new capital and find a way to make the team better. So we're going to watch that really closely this week. As we said throughout, the NFL is a never say never type of league. But I think the main thing to keep in mind is that John Lynch and the 49ers, I mean, they even released on social media John Lynch on Brandon Aiyuk. Right after John Lynch had his main thought on Brandon Aiyuk about wanting to keep him with the 49ers Twitter put that out there. You know, it was almost like they're trying to send their message that they want Aiyuk around. And obviously Aiyuk's camp is going to want to negotiate for the best deal possible. Fred Warner might have put it the best, and he spoke today because he had the big negotiation in 2021, but it seemed that was the least dramatic out of all these big 49ers A-list negotiations. And Warner said that anytime that you're dealing with tens of millions of dollars to pay somebody to play at the very highest level, it's going to take some time. And that's obviously happening right now. There does seem to be, you know, especially from the outside looking in, that there are some feelings of unrest, and I feel that those are normal at this time of a negotiation, because that inflection point of the draft is coming up. So anyway, we'll keep you updated. We'll go standard with this. We'll take it day by day and then see what happens on Thursday, which is the first round of the draft. Lynch then, speaking of that first round, said the 49ers this year have 22 first round grades on prospects. So that's more than each of the past two seasons when the 49ers had fewer first round grades. So 49ers obviously believe that the top half of this draft is going to be strong, but John Lynch did openly say that the bottom half of this draft may not be as strong as usual. This is This was crazy. Lynch said that about 85 prospects inside of a pool of about 270 that the 49ers had initially thought would enter the draft. So this is going back to the fall. Did not enter the draft. They instead returned to college. So NIL, all that stuff has changed the dynamic of the draft calculus. For that reason, the draft in the bottom rounds, the 49ers don't expect it to be as robust. So you might ask, does that increase their chances of trading up? There's an argument to be made for that. But John Lynch's main point today was you have to treat the draft as a game. This is something I've talked about. This was his quote. You've got to be nimble. You've got to be flexible so you can react to anything that comes your way. And that's why you've got to be prepared. And obviously the 49ers believe that they've prepared as well as possible to use their 10 picks as adroitly as possible. So they're going to leave themselves the option to trade up. They're going to leave themselves the option to trade down. They're going to treat this like a game where you have to have all the play calls at your disposal, including staying put. And then depending on what's the best option to do at any given time, you go for it. At pick number 31, he said they have 3 or 4 different needs that they can address with pick number 31. They haven't determined which way they're going to go, which I do think is the smart way to approach things. Now, there was a lot of talk about drafting an offensive lineman, maybe multiple offensive linemen. Lynch today really hammered home that he loves the adaptability of the linemen in this class. He likes the fact that there's guys that can play both guard and tackle. He also really emphasized that drafting an offensive lineman doesn't necessarily have to be something for this year. It could be for the future, which, if you follow that line of thought, that means that trading up for an offensive lineman to play now, it probably isn't the 49ers' preferred value play in this draft. I think that's something we've already hit on. We've talked about the fact that their top 30 visit list, the 22 visits that we know about, only one of those has been a first-round grade, and that was the defensive lineman. That's Marshawn Nealand. They've been more focused on looking at rounds 2 through 4, the middle top half of the draft, we'll put it that way, than they have been at looking at the very upper reaches of the draft and the very lower reaches of the draft. And it makes sense, and it really vibes with what John Lynch was saying today. He said we don't have to have somebody that starts right away on the offensive line. We can focus on somebody as more of a long-term project to fill a longer-term need. And it also vibes with the back half of this draft probably won't be as strong due to the changing nature of college football, more players than expected returning. Those of you who want a legacy draft, Frank Gore Jr., Luke McCaffrey, Brendan Rice, John Lynch's quote today, I believe in bloodlines. I really do. So that might be good news for you. I will put a short up on this because I've talked about this a lot, and I asked John Lynch about it, and he agreed with me. I talked about the fact that over the past couple decades, defensive line athleticism seems to have outpaced athleticism on the O-line. Lynch agreed with me, and my question was, does he think that that's changing now? Because the 49ers do like a lot of offensive linemen in this draft. And John Lynch did say that he thinks it is changing. He did say that, yes, a lot of money has been invested in offensive linemen. The people will follow the money. A lot more people are training to be offensive linemen for a younger age. We saw the edge rusher revolution. Now we may be seeing the offensive line revolution, and it sounds like it might be time for the 49ers to get in on that O-line game. I do think they're going to make moves after focusing on defense and free agency. I do think they're going to make moves on the O-line. But remember, the goal of free agency was to insulate themselves floor-wise for this year. So they have all the starters back, even up front, from 2023. And as Lynch said, they could take some longer-term swings. And I think that's the way that this draft is going to be focused after. They have all their options open, but it seems like value plays, staying with 10 picks, maybe even stockpiling more picks in those middle rounds if they can. It sounds like that's what the 49ers want to do. We also talked with Brock Purdy and Fred Warner today. Both of those guys, and I'm going to be writing about this on The Athletic, both of those guys, new beginnings, right? Purdy got married, his wife Jenna, and Fred Warner has a baby son now. So, and that happened, he was born right after the Super Bowl. So fresh starts for two of the 49er star players on both sides of the football, and we'll get a little bit more into that. That's the update here from the facility. I've got a plane to catch, so wanted to give it to you short and sweet. We'll talk to you all very soon. Stay tuned for the big piece.